I was folding the last sweater into my suitcase when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was a reminder about the airport shuttle or one of those automated travel updates. But the screen showed Caleb's name, and instead of a text, it was a voice message. I pressed play. "You won't be flying with us. Mom. Nadia doesn't want you along." For a moment, I thought the audio glitched. The words felt clipped, unfinished, like they belonged to someone else's family. I replayed it, leaning closer this time, and that's when I heard it. Nadia's whisper behind him, low but clear enough to slice through the room. "Tell her before she tries to come." My hand stayed suspended in the air, fingers curled around nothing. The suitcase lay open on the bed, the new jacket I'd bought for the trip folded neatly across the top. I'd spent weeks planning checking flight times, comparing hotel reviews, picking activities I thought they'd enjoy. Just hours earlier, I had confirmed every reservation, smiling at the thought of the three of us finally spending time together. And then, with one message, the air shifted. I sat down slowly, the edge of the mattress dipping beneath me. The silence in the room seemed to swell, louder than Caleb's voice, louder than Nadia's whisper. There had been no hesitation in what he said, no uncertainty, not even the courtesy of an apology. They didn't want me. Not on the trip I paid for, not beside them, not at all. A faint tightness gathered beneath my ribs. Not the sharp burst of anger I expected, but something steadier, colder, a stillness that felt like a truth settling into place after being ignored for far too long. I set the phone beside me, staring at the half-packed suitcase as if it belonged to someone else entirely. And as the message replayed itself in my mind, I realized that the decisions I would make next wouldn't come from hurt, but from clarity. And that clarity was already beginning to form as I reached for the laptop on my dresser. Morning light filtered across my kitchen counter, catching the rim of my coffee mug as I sat before the laptop. The booking confirmation page was still open, the same one I had stared at last night after Caleb's message cracked something open inside me. 3 passengers, all under my account, all charged to my card. The cursor blinked beside my name, steady and indifferent. I rested my hands on the table, letting the weight of everything settle. It wasn't nostalgia that filled me, it was clarity, sharp as morning air. The mortgage payment I covered the year Caleb and Nadia said they were in a rough patch. The insurance premiums I handled quietly when Caleb's hours were cut, and he didn't want Nadia to worry. The groceries, the car repairs, the small emergencies, they had become rhythms, not favors. I never kept a ledger. I never asked for payback. But rejection has a strange way of turning memories into numbers. Suddenly, every kindness felt like a line entry in an account I shouldn't have been the only one maintaining. I replayed the voice message again, letting each word settle on me like a measure of honesty I hadn't expected. This time I noticed more the ease in Caleb's tone, the almost casual cadence. No sorrow, no conflict, not even a pause before delivering the blow. Just the sound of someone completing a task he didn't find difficult at all. I imagined calling him back, asking when the shift happened, what changed, what I'd missed. But the quiet of my small home answered before I could even lift the phone. This wasn't sudden. Some people don't push you away abruptly. They simply stop pulling you closer, one small inch at a time, until the distance feels inevitable. The trip I'd planned so carefully now seemed foreign, distant, almost foolish in its optimism. The jacket folded in my suitcase, the printout of show tickets on the counter, all of it felt like remnants of an assumption I should never have made. I closed the laptop gently, the confirmation screen fading as the faint beginnings of a new resolve took its place, guiding me toward what I needed to do next. I closed the laptop, the soft click sounding more final than I expected. My hands didn't shake now. The steadiness surprised me. As if my body understood something before my mind caught up. I walked through the living room, letting my eyes settle on things I'd stopped noticing. The narrow shelf by the window, the one I built the first winter after my husband died, when silence felt too heavy and I needed something I could shape with my own hands. The soft rug in the corner, chosen on a day when I'd promised myself I deserved comfort even if nobody else offered it. The row of plants along the sill, each one watered every morning in a ritual that grounded me more than any conversation with Caleb had in years. My life had always been full. It was only in the places where I kept carving out room for people who drifted farther and farther away that emptiness grew. I made tea and carried it to the table, the steam brushing my face as I sat. My phone rested beside the mug, still holding the message that started it all. I played it again one last time, not for hurt, for understanding. There it was, a small pause before Caleb spoke. Barely a breath, but unmistakable once I listened for it. Not hesitation out of love. Hesitation like someone waiting for a signal. Then the scrape of Nadia's voice behind him. Low, but clear enough. Tell her before she tries to come. He wasn't torn. He wasn't conflicted. He was choosing the smoother path for himself, even if it meant stepping over me to get there. Something shifted quietly inside me. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. That had already passed through like a cold front. It wasn't bitterness either. I didn't want to carry that weight. It was a decision still forming, still fragile, but alive. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't beg. And I wouldn't pay to be kept at arm's length. I set the phone down gently and rose from the table. Already knowing the next step I needed to take, I returned to my desk. The tea cooling beside the keyboard. The reservation page was still open, the bright confirmation banner looking more like a taunt than a promise. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing steadily, letting the quiet settle around me. Then I clicked. Flights first. One button. One prompt. Are you sure? Yes, I whispered, though no one needed to hear it. A refund notification appeared almost instantly. $5,000, minus a modest fee, already making its way back to me. Next, the hotel. The Grand Marston in Midtown. I clicked through the steps, accepted the partial charge, and watched the reservation dissolve into a short email stamped, canceled. Then the smaller pieces, the city passes I'd purchased because Caleb loved guided tours as a child. The museum tickets Nadia insisted she must see. The transport cards I bought so none of us would have to worry about cash or lines. Each one reversed in minutes. Clean, simple, with every confirmation that landed in my inbox. Something inside me eased. It wasn't satisfaction, not spite, not revenge. Something quieter. Like setting down a bag I'd carried too long without realizing how heavy it had become. I wasn't doing this to punish them. I was doing it because I refused to pay for a space I was no longer welcome in. My phone stayed silent on the table. No calls from Caleb. No curious text from Nadia. They weren't wondering. They weren't checking in. They assumed I was exactly where they'd always left me, silent, compliant, endlessly giving. They were wrong. When the final tab closed, the screen faded to its soft blue background. I rested my palms on the laptop's warm surface for a moment before shutting it. Slow and deliberate, the click sounding like the end of a chapter. No announcement, no confrontation, just clarity, and the first steps of a decision I knew I wouldn't undo. I stood from the chair, letting the stillness of the room guide me toward what I knew I needed to do next. 2 days later, at dawn, I stood by the window with a mug warming my hands. The water outside moved in slow, steady currents, the kind that made time feel softer around the edges. Somewhere across the state, Caleb and Nadia were probably loading their suitcases into the back of their SUV, confident the trip was set. believing every detail was still covered under my name. At 7:11 a.m., my phone rang. I didn't move. It rang again a minute later, then again. By the time I sat down to breakfast, I'd counted 11 missed calls. The silence between each one felt deliberate, as if Caleb was giving himself time to rehearse whatever version of the truth he hoped would persuade me to fix things. When the 12th call came, I let it roll to voicemail. His voice emerged strained, tight around the edges. "Mom, they can't find our reservation. What's going on? Call me back." Another call followed, sharper, then another, angrier. Words clipped, breath quick. Nadia's voice faint in the background, rising in disbelief. A fourth message came through, accusations wrapped in panic, then nothing. A long stretch of quiet so complete it pressed against the walls of my kitchen. I pictured them at the counter, the airline agent showing them the canceled status in clear, bold letters, offering alternate flights they couldn't afford without the card I'd once placed everything on. I could almost see the way Caleb's expression would change from confusion to shock to blame. Around noon, the ringing started again, but the tone had shifted. Less fury, more urgency. They weren't at the airport anymore. They were already on the road, driving across the state toward the hotel, clinging to the hope that something, anything, might still be intact. I set the phone down gently on the table, watching the screen pulse with each new attempt. I didn't need to pick it up to know exactly what they would discover next. And with that thought settling quietly inside me, I turned toward the hallway, preparing myself for what the afternoon would bring. By late afternoon, the number of missed calls had climbed so high my phone stopped displaying them individually. It simply read 20+ missed calls, a small banner stretching across the screen like a warning I'd already chosen not to heed. When the phone rang again, I finally answered. Caleb didn't bother with a greeting. "They said the hotel is canceled too." "Mom, why would you do this?" His voice cracked between shock and anger, the kind that comes from finding out the ground beneath you isn't as stable as you assumed. I took a slow breath. "I only acted on what you told me." There was silence, sharp and sudden. "You didn't want me to come," I added. He stumbled over the next words, the way someone does when a truth they didn't expect to face suddenly stands too close. That's not what I meant." Nadia was stressed. "I didn't, Mom. You should have at least asked before canceling everything." I was very clear. I said, "You were too." I could hear him shifting the phone, a low mutter to Nadia, then her voice sharp, furious, cutting through the line. "Put her on speaker." A beat later, she spoke directly at me. "You need to fix this. Now. Call the airline, give them your card, redo the hotel. We've already driven hours. You owe us that much." The entitlement in her tone was so familiar it barely startled me. For years, she'd spoken to me like that as if I were a service, not a person. "My part is finished," I said, sitting up a little straighter. "You told me I wasn't wanted. I respected that. That's ridiculous." Nadia snapped. "You're being dramatic. Just make it right. There's nothing left for me to fix." I replied, my voice calm, steady. "You made your plans." I adjusted mine. A heavy silence followed, thick with disbelief, maybe even the first edges of realization. I didn't fill it. I simply waited, letting the truth settle where it needed to settle, and prepared myself for the moment when they would finally understand what came next. When the last call faded into silence, I set the phone aside and reached for an old notebook tucked in the drawer beneath the window. Its cover was worn, soft at the edges, something I'd used for grocery lists and garden notes. Never for anything that mattered, but today, it felt right. I opened to a clean page and began writing. First, the insurance I'd been paying on Caleb's car for the past 3 years, then the monthly phone bill, 2 lines, both on my plan, the streaming accounts tied to my card, one for movies, another for shows Nadia insisted she needed. Did she, the small loan I'd given them during their first year of marriage, the one they never brought up again. Not even to say they couldn't repay it. The list grew fast. Electric bill contributions I'd made quietly when they were short. Groceries I'd paid for just because I was already at the store. Little transfers here and there, $50. 100 sent without being asked, but always used without acknowledgement. Line after line. The notebook filled with things I'd carried without naming. Now I named them. And once written, the path forward became clear. I logged into the insurance account and clicked cancel. The screen asked if I was sure. I was. Next. The phone plan. I initiated the transfer, shifting responsibility to Caleb's name. Streaming accounts removed. A single click each. Automatic payments disabled, one by one. The numbers disappearing from my dashboard like dust shaken from a rug. No announcement, no explanation. Just a quiet untethering from obligations I had tied around myself without noticing. When I finally closed the notebook, the house felt different, not empty, not hollow, but settled, the way a room does after furniture has been rearranged into its rightful place. I walked to the window, watching late light fall across the water. The quiet didn't feel like loss. It felt like space I hadn't allowed myself in years. And in that space, I began to understand what I needed to reclaim next. That evening, just as the sun slipped behind the ridge and left the house in a soft amber haze, my phone lit up again. Caleb's name appeared on the screen, but the sharpness I'd come to expect in his voice wasn't there when I answered. "Mom, please." The words came out thin, stretched, frayed. "The hotel won't refund us unless you call. They said the cardholder has to speak to them directly. We don't have money for the drive back." His breath hitched. And for a moment, the silence between us held something raw, fear, panic, maybe even regret. But beneath all of it, I heard something far more familiar, a long echo of expectation. The steady belief that no matter what happened, I would step in, fix it, pay for it, carry it. I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle. "I've already taken care of what belonged to me," I said quietly. "The rest is yours to handle." There was a pause, a small, stunned beat. Then Nadia's voice surged through the speaker, sharper than his. "Marvella, listen. If you just call and explain, they'll reverse everything. This doesn't have to be—" "She can," Caleb cut in quickly. "Mom, you can undo this." But I could hear it now, the shift. They weren't asking for understanding. They were asking for access to my card, to my time, to the version of me they had relied on too long. "I'm not calling," I said. "You'll need to make other arrangements." Nadia tried bargaining first. The kind of logic that sounded more like demands dressed as reason. Caleb tried guilt next, hesitant at first, then leaning into it the way he always did when desperation pushed him toward old habits. Neither worked. My voice stayed steady, a quiet thread they couldn't tug loose. "I'm not punishing you," I told them, "and I'm not abandoning you. I'm simply stepping out of a role I should never have held alone." For a long moment, neither spoke, just breathing, heavy and uneven on the other end of the line. When the call ended, the house felt still again, settled, grounded as I prepared myself for what the next morning would bring. The next 2 weeks unfolded in a kind of quiet I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I went to my woodworking class on Saturdays, learning how to coax clean lines and smooth edges out of raw pieces of cedar and oak. I walked by the harbor most mornings, letting the salt air cut through the last remnants of tension. I even met up with 2 old friends I hadn't seen since before Caleb's wedding, women who remembered me as something other than a solution to someone else's emergencies. Life settled into its own steady rhythm. Then, one Saturday afternoon, a car rolled slowly into my driveway. I recognized the hood before I recognized the man stepping out. Caleb, alone. He didn't look angry, not defensive, not ready to argue, just tired, worn down in a way that made him seem younger and older at the same time. "Mom," he said quietly when I opened the door. We sat on the porch. The wooden boards warm beneath our feet. The air held the faint tang of sea salt drifting up from the harbor, a calming presence neither of us commented on. He kept his hands folded, elbows resting on his knees, as if steadying himself. "I need to say some things," he began. Voice careful, so he did. He apologized for the voice message, for the coldness of it, for the way he let Nadia speak through him instead of finding his own voice. He apologized for the disrespect, for the years he leaned on my help without understanding the weight of it. He admitted he'd let Nadia's discomfort dictate decisions he should have taken responsibility for. And he admitted the airport fiasco forced them both to face parts of their marriage and themselves they'd been avoiding for far too long. I listened, not interrupting, not rushing to soothe him or fill silence with reassurances, just listening, something I realized I had rarely done for myself. His words were honest. But honesty and repair are not the same thing. Both take time. Both require a steady hand, the way my woodworking instructor always reminded me. When he finally fell quiet, the yard around us felt impossibly still. I took a slow breath, knowing exactly where the next part of our conversation needed to begin. A month passed, soft around the edges, but steady in its shifts. Caleb and I spoke now and then, short calls, honest ones. No requests slipped beneath the surface. No unspoken debts lingered between us. Whatever our relationship was becoming, it was clearer, lighter, not shaped by old expectations. I no longer paid their bills. No insurance notices, no automatic transfers, no quiet financial rescues they pretended not to notice. And I no longer waited for invitations that never came. If they wanted me present, they reached out. If they didn't, I lived my life without adjusting my rhythm to their distance. For the first time in years, I felt the shape of my own choices. One quiet Thursday morning, I opened my laptop and booked a small weekend trip for myself, a stretch of the Oregon coast I'd once dreamt of visiting with my late husband, but never found the courage to travel to alone. 2 nights. A cottage near the shoreline. Walking trails I could almost hear through the photos on the screen. My suitcase sat by the door again, but it wasn't heavy this time. It held clothes and books, not expectations. As I walked through the house, each room felt like a part of a life I had built with intention, not out of sacrifice, not out of obligation, but out of who I was allowed to be now. Family could be rebuilt. I believed that more each day, but not when one person carried all the weight and called it love. Some distances had to be honored before closeness could mean anything again. Caleb was learning that. So was I. I locked the door behind me, lifted my bag, and stepped onto the porch. Morning air cooled my face, and the quiet hum of the neighborhood settled around me like a gentle welcome. The road stretched open before me, mine. Finally. And I walked toward my car knowing exactly where the next chapter of my life would begin.